Greetings and welcome to the Modern Alchemist Channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is the M.A.P, the Modern Alchemist Podcast. Today on the M.A.P, we have a bit of a treat. I was recently asked to be interviewed by Ryan from Ascended Minds and Ascended Minds Podcast, and it was super fun. I want to thank Ryan again for the opportunity. It was great to field a whole variety of questions and be able to answer questions for his listeners. And I am sure that this will also answer a lot of questions for you guys out here on the Modern Alchemist Channel. Thank you again, Ryan, for allowing me to mirror post this. And I suggest you guys check out Ascended Minds and Ascended Minds Podcast. He's doing really great things there. And it was really, really fun to spend some time with him and talk about alchemy and the esoteric. So without further ado, let's get started.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Ascended Minds Show. Today, we've got a great guest with us. He is Aubrey Forrest, also known as the Modern Alchemist, and he has a YouTube channel by the same name with a whole bunch of great videos on there. So, Aubrey, welcome, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Well, so we've got about a million things that I definitely want to chat with you about. I know we've got a lot of listeners. I did a little sneak peek that you guys were coming on the show, and we've got a lot of people that are super interested in alchemy. So I guess to start us off, you know, you hear alchemy and you think of some old white-haired guy that's getting mercury poison because he's trying to turn various things into gold. But what really is alchemy?
As I explain on my channel, alchemy is threefold. It's a language, it's a science, and it's an art. And by language, I mean it employs a series of symbols, signs, tokens, instruments, which are used to describe the universe at large. So, like the tree of life from the Kabbalah is an implement or instrument of alchemy. The field and then the esoteric sciences are combined with the practical sciences. So an understanding of biology and chemistry and electric universe science is essential in order to then use that as the means by which you can decrypt astrotheological archetypes in astrology or mythology, and understand where those sources of power come from, and how we're all kind of built into the system together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it definitely does.
Do I need to restate that? That felt like I went off the tracks there. Do I need to restate that somehow?
No, I mean, I think that's a great place to start anyway.
I mean, here the thing is with alchemy, there are actually three forms of alchemy that you'll find this number 3 pops up. I'm certain there's probably more, but the traditional alchemy comes out of its origins in Egypt. This is the one that everyone's really familiar with. The idea of chem being associated with the color black, and that association is drawn by the nature of the fact that the Nile River swells annually, and then as it recedes, the silt remaining leaves the land black, and it's super fertile. And it's a component of this eternal cycle. And so the people that inhabited those lands developed a science which was designed to extend the life of man, and to improve it and to help you develop connections. But alchemy is a lot of times it's associated with like the Philosopher's Stone, Nicholas Flamel, living forever. And this theme of immortality is actually brought out in Taoist alchemy and in Indian alchemy, which Indian alchemy being the Rasayana alchemy. And each of these are designed as a science. All of them are like a proto-chemistry, meaning that this is the foundation from which chemistry developed in modern times, as well as the scientific method. So, unlike other occult practices which might be steeped in religious observances, each form of alchemical practice is at its core scientific. And through what one finds is that through the application or just the discovery process of seeing the connection of it all, you develop a spiritual component. Like, it just manifests. I mentioned this in another class recently, that it comes to you. Like, when you see that you're in it as a conscious component, and that consciousness is not necessarily definable, but that there are certainly properties which are universal, where you can look at yourself and look at your environment and see the similarities and draw strength emotionally, physically, spiritually from that. So alchemy is a big part of that, learning that, and for me, it's a big part of it is demystifying the mystical. For myself, I don't think that it's novel or new that we as human beings are secular in our mindset. I honestly, when I look back in history and in my study of mythology, it seems that these were far more cosmopolitan people who had designed these mythologies because of the complex nature and utility of them. So the same kind of inheritance we have intellectually that makes us skeptical, makes us analytical, I believe those properties are inherited human traits, not new to us. You know, we look down on our ancestors like they're some savages or something.
Yeah.
I look up. To me, because I come from a perennial point of view, where I'm looking at all of us in this together. So each culture is making its effort at both recovering knowledge and preserving and disseminating that knowledge. And when you realize that you can find these similarities globally throughout history, in my mind, it rewrites human history to a large degree from what we've all been taught, conventionally, to something that makes us as human beings quite extraordinary, really. We're survivors.
Yeah, undeniably. And it's definitely an interesting thing to see that we've got this big egoic attitude that we are the most advanced and the most modern that has ever been. And that's just, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I come from a cataclysmic perspective where I look at various ages and essentially there's a way to determine when culture shifts, and it's by working at it from the backside, meaning you look at when religion suddenly develops, and religion usually develops as a result of pressure on culture. So something has changed environmentally, and as a consequence of that change, people are seeking explanation. And that explanation then is often preserved in two levels. One is exoteric, meaning that this is contemporary religious observance. And then beneath that is an esoteric understanding of what actually is going on. Having both together preserves that information, and then we today inherited that. Our mistake today is that we look at a lot of things which are written as prophecy, and we assume that it's speaking of our future rather than this is an inherited document that's actually completed its cycle. And the idea of things being cyclical is where that document has its utility. Anyway.
So I'm curious, how did you start down this path? We like to kind of talk about our origin stories a little bit. How did you get interested in alchemy? Have you always been interested in alchemy? What led you here?
Actually, I'm glad you asked. because I've had this question asked of me by my viewers a lot, and they're like, "How did you get from, you're here now?" And it's very much, I like to draw a pop culture analogy
Sure.
to help explain something. So if you've seen Doctor Strange, there's this whole scene where he's sitting in front of the Ancient One, and he's like, "Okay, I get it. I'm here. You're there. How did you get from here to there?" And she's like, "Well, how did you become a doctor?" And he's like, "Well, lots of reading, hard work, and study." And he's like, "Okay, there you go." Now, not to be glib, but my journey has been the process of a lot of curiosity. And that sort of has been built into me since childhood, where I would press for an answer. And I started off as a kid. My earliest memory, it's really funny, is on my 5th birthday. I remember 4th birthday, I got a AM radio, and I could only pull in like those evangelical channels in a country music station.
Oh man.
And as a kid, I totally dug the evangelical channel, so I'd go to sleep listening to that. And that sort of moved my mind in this direction, so that by the time I was a young adolescent and I was going through catechism as a Catholic, I again was very interested in, I saw that the doctrine, the mechanisms were there to describe something larger. And for whatever reason, as a kid, I always felt that, and I still feel this way, that religion brings us a sense of narcissism.
Yeah.
Because it makes us so damn important, right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
whole universe literally is hinging on my every decision. Because heaven forbid I choose to do something evil, and now something's got to compensate. I mean, there has to be an atonement made for all that.
Right.
And it's because of me, or you, or some other person.
You shouldn't have eaten that bacon, man.
Huh?
I shouldn't have eaten that bacon.
Right. Yeah, because the production of that bacon results in contamination of lots of land agriculturally and river systems, and the torture of animals, right? So you're a component of all that. I mean, just as a segue, just to give you a sense of where my meditations take me sometimes, because I contemplate a broad array of things, and I'll get back to my origin story in just a sec. But,
Yeah.
we each make a tacit agreement when we put our key in our automobile and turn the ignition to go to work or go get groceries or something, and that is that the gas will run the car and that I'll be able to do it. And any amount of whatever happens in the world is okay, so long as that works.
Yeah.
It's a horrible way to think, but when you realize that in the first world we're extracting so many resources, it's absurd. That's part of that agreement. Now, the reason I mention this is because one of my viewers was asking me, where does some of all this anxiety come from? If you draw your understanding that our consciousness is dual, that during our waking hours we live as individuals, but during our sleeping hours we participate in a collective human consciousness as described by Carl Jung, and that consciousness carries with it identifiers and archetypes and things whereby we can all communicate together. That consciousness also unifies us in suffering, so that we in the first world are dosing ourselves up heavily on antidepressants when we live this amazing life objectively, and by comparison to the rest of the world. And part of that, I believe, is because that's this debt. Now, how did I get to that and everything else? And it was, as I progressed through religion and as I kind of matured, I didn't mature extraordinarily fast. I still was growing up in the United States. This is a predominantly Christian country, and as Richard Dawkins points out so brilliantly, if I had been born in India, I'd have been Hindi. If I had been born in the Middle East, I'd probably have been Muslim. Yeah. And because of my nature, I'd be very dedicated in whatever religion I was born into, in spite of the fact that both of my parents were super secular. Like, it blew their mind that I was so religiously minded, but I just kind of had this connection thing going on. And
yeah,
go ahead.
That's interesting in itself, because a lot of times, myself included, we're definitely indoctrined with our parents' ideals. So it's kind of an interesting tidbit just at the beginning that you kind of went a different way.
Yeah, I totally did. and I was all by myself on that. I'm an only child, so being all by yourself is not a big deal. Those of you guys out there who are only children, you get me. You wind up learning how to operate as a single unit a lot of times, and so that also was a big component. Growing up, I had a lot of I had a lot of opportunity to think because of the strictures under which I was placed as a youth. I didn't get out a lot. Academics was everything to my parents, so that performance was necessary. And that ideal of performing academically and stuff pursued me. Eventually, and this will probably surprise some of my viewers, one of my friends in high school was Mormon, and eventually I wound up joining that religion, and a year later, meeting a woman who became my wife. We're still married, have kids. They're all grown up now. In fact, I'm going to be a grandparent in January.
Wow, congratulations.
So, and none of us are still in the church, by the way. Like, we all kind of grew up, and when they were in high school, during my entire evolution throughout that religion, there is a esoteric component definitely embedded within it, and as a lay ministry with a progressive reception of priesthood authority. So, eventually you become an elder within the church, and you hold the Melchizedek priesthood, and you understand that those are operating principles. But ultimately, that religion is still cumbered by literalism. Everything is absolutely literal, and there's a point where you can't do that anymore. You can't be literal, because you realize the original authors never considered any of that material as literal.
Yeah.
There's just a point when your research takes you there, and you're like, oh, when they were writing about this, they were looking around locally, but they were doing that in an effort to describe something they were watching celestially.
Yeah.
So that people, just as I use a pop culture example to bring you closer to the idea of what I'm trying to say with Doctor Strange, they did exactly the same thing by looking around and saying, okay, here's this king, and he's a complete douchebag.
Right.
And his name is Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh is doing all this stuff, and he needs a friend, so let's go find Enkidu. And Enkidu, and he wind up duking it out. And, those descriptions aren't about necessarily two men, even though, there's a tradition that those empires existed in Gilgamesh, But I believe that those are descriptions of an astrotheological place, so that Gilgamesh, being a tyrannical king, could be seen as the planet Jupiter, as a celestial star, burning and blazing away. The cosmos, as we see it right now, is dramatically different from what is described mythologically, where the authors of ancient mythology describe us as being in the presence of the gods, meaning that the orbital distance between these worlds, which we still name after gods, were invisible sight, not these little pinpoints of reflected light, in the heavens, but that we can actually see, and that their interactions and the dynamics of their interactions were the result of our mythological plays. Hey, did you seen Thor Ragnarok?
I have not yet. It's definitely on my to-do list. It's...
So you definitely want to see it. I don't want to spoil it for you. It's a good movie, but the mythologies that they teach there have astrotheological correspondences, so that when you're watching that, and this won't spoil anything per se, but it might open you to some other perspectives. Thor fulfills the role of the mythological Ares or Mars. The Hulk fulfills the role of Jupiter. Loki fulfills the role of the sun, and Hel, or Hela, fulfills the role of Saturn. And the girl Valkyrie fulfills the role of Venus. And understanding their play and observing how different characters interact, how some characters are immobilized, and then how they present as they're immobilized. If you have any understanding of mythology, or if you've studied different images mythologically, you'll be like, oh, here's that one. So it makes seeing the movie for me, when I go to a movie like that, and I watch a superhero film, I realize I'm watching a mythology play itself out. And they did this one so well. It was so well done. I was so happy.
Oh man, I'm definitely gonna go watch that when we get out of here for sure. So I mean,
Yeah, it was,
and that
dude, it was funny too, which was delightful. It was funny, but it was just really, really done well. Like
awesome.
like for instance, okay, Thor has lightning powers, right?
Right, right.
Right? He's god of lightning. That's his whole. Um, Hela is the goddess of death. Now, I'll give you an understanding just briefly. The association of death ties it to Saturn, okay, because Saturn is also associated with death. This is the Grim Reaper.
Sure.
But Saturn is also considered Brahma, which is the creator god. And in Kabbalah, Saturn fulfills a feminine receptive aspect. But as a creator deity, the reason that a creator deity can then be tied to a god of death or a goddess of death is because a creator deity gives limitation. It's no longer this eternal energy thing. Now it's a bird, and it has limit. And because it has a start point, it has an end point. And so by de facto, they build into it death. So when you see her fight, I was so pleased. But she manifests weapons. She just out of nothing, she's boom, and here are weapons everywhere.
That is awesome.
The goddess of death is a creator god as well. So I was just like a kid without insulin resistance in a candy shop.
Yeah, we are definitely gonna check that out. And I mean, you see these kind of astrotheological themes in pretty much everything that we look at these days, and I can't help but wonder how much different the sky looked, back then than it does now, with the absence of light pollution and the absence of any kind of exogenous gases that we've put up in the atmosphere. I mean, how much more awe-inspiring must have the night sky been?
Well, it definitely was considerably brighter, and there's one easy way to just with the knowledge we have now. Prior, at the conclusion of the Pleistocene, we have this megaflora, megafauna, right?
Yeah.
Giant sloths and these huge trees, and under our current degree of illumination, our star cannot sustain megaflora, and if you can't sustain megaflora, there's no megafauna, right? It's the whole thing. So right there, we know that we've suffered a reduction of light in one way or another. And that can be from any number of causes. I would suggest that we literally watched gods die, meaning that we watched stars extinguish. And as a result of these mythological plays. I discuss this on my channel. In fact, right now I'm doing Essentials of Practical Alchemy, and I discuss that very idea in the first class, where I relate it to the science of magic. But I would suggest, like anyone who's ever grown anything in their garage or in a greenhouse, they understand that the amount of illumination that the organism or plant receives is directly corresponds to the degree of vegetation. Yeah. Okay? So if it's not very bright, it doesn't vegetate very much. If it has lots and lots of light, you have massive vegetation. So the world is dramatically different now. And believe it or not, all of the changes can be expressed and explained by decrypting the mythologies, which have been preserved for us. Mythologies where Prometheus is bound to a rock. That idea, when you understand who Prometheus is or was, and the significance of having one's liver regularly damaged over time, what that would do to one, right? If you were human, eventually, if you were one color, let's say, or normal color, and eventually your liver's damaged, you turn yellow, right? So our star in the heavens is what color?
Yep.
Yellow.
Yellow.
And you understand that Zeus is Jupiter. Zeus is just the Greek name of the planet Jupiter. So there's this relationship between the star that's currently above our heads and the planet Jupiter. Relationships that are borne out in other mythologies, describing the planet Jupiter in different colors than it currently is. So that's, for me, that's where alchemy led me, because I kept looking at all these symbols, and I kept saying, okay, well, why would I put Jupiter at this point in a triangle? Why would I put Venus over here? What is unique about Venus? And then when I realized that by placing them there, I'm kind of describing a snapshot of the past, and cognitively allowing myself to draw upon those energetic flows which have been established and reestablished through human consciousness over hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. It's why certain icons are so powerful and others are not, because living human consciousness can empower something, make it robust. It's why brand recognition is so important to corporate America.
Yeah, absolutely. And why so many
principle, exactly the same principle.
Yeah, and why so many esoteric symbols are baked into a lot of the brands that we recognize. Like, my favorite one is the Nike swoosh. That's basically a ring of Saturn. It's trying to conjure you up an unconscious image of the Saturn rings.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, and there are examples of cubes, hexagrams, diamonds, W's, B's and W's. Each of these relate almost always to the same symbol. They often tie you right back to Saturn.
Yeah.
And if it's not Saturn that's observed, then you'll see solar imagery everywhere, like an eye breaking over a mountainside, or the sun, or maybe a sun and a moon, and again, it's what a company is doing is they're literally holding up a flag, like an ensign, and they're saying, okay, this is my corporate ethos as defined by the planetary influence and the Kabbalistic side under which I'm building my company. So I would say that most people that employ imagery like that are probably cognizant of what they're doing, especially if they're successful at it.
Yeah, it's definitely not on accident, I wouldn't think at all.
No.
So help me understand, and I'm sure this is probably pretty basic questions for you, but I know a couple of people in our audience, and myself especially. Help me understand the difference between alchemy and hermetic magic. I mean, I know all magic is related in my mind, at its core, at the base, but there's all these different subgroups, and how is alchemy different than, the study of Kabbalah or hermetic magic, some of the other magical practices?
Not a problem. And then I'll get back, because I actually forgot I segued right out of the rest of the origin story.
Oh, right.
Sorry. The difference is really simple. Alchemy is, consider alchemy the library, or the card file within the library that holds everything all together. And then housed within that would be astrology, hermetic magic, which uses the tools that alchemy provides, because it gives all the same symbols are employed. And so, let me see if I can make this a little bit clearer.
So it's kind
alchemy is like the cup that holds the other stuff together.
Okay.
It's the by having an understanding that each of those fill a component of alchemy. So alchemy is not complete as just by itself. Like, for instance, to complete alchemy, you would have a knowledge of astrology, Kabbalah, the tarot, numerology. Palmistry might be helpful for sure. You would have And these are the esoteric sciences that are essential for someone to become a magician. But see, and it's funny because I've actually redefined. For me, when I say magician, I'm going to have to come clear on this. Magic for me is not a supernatural occurrence.
Agreed.
Magic is a contracted word, like anciently, not so anciently, we used to say, God be with you, right? When you say goodbye, God be with you. And that eventually became contracted to God by and then goodbye, right? Because God is good, so goodbye. Similarly today, instead of saying what is up, we say sup, right?
Sure.
Which is this contraction. Likewise, magic is a contraction of the word electromagnetic force, where electro is eventually dropped as well as force, unless you're George Lucas, and and then magnetic was simply contracted to magic by dropping the net. And it's fascinating how we have certain key words which are components of electromagnetic that describe everything we use, like the net, which is magic, you know. So anything that is electromagnetic, with an understanding, let me back this up here just a sec, to clarify. Your viewers may be aware of the Emerald Tablets. The Emerald Tablets contain within them 7 Hermetic Principles.
Yes.
These Hermetic Principles are descriptives of scientific and universal operations. The first of which is mentalism. An understanding of mentalism helps provide you the bridge between the electromagnetic force and magic and manifestation. And by that I mean that as we consciously cognate, as we think of a thing, we can bring that thing into being. Now, there would have been a time when the system would have had more power to it. Anciently, I believe, and I think this is why we obsess with the symbolic demonstration of a hero losing a limb and getting a cybernetic limb, like Luke Skywalker or Al in Modern Alchemist, right? Ed in the Modern Alchemist, he loses an arm and a leg and gets a mechanical one. It's an indication of our fall as living beings into a lower state. It's so funny, I just actually got through teaching all this stuff this last week. In terms of giving an understanding of what magic is about. Let me get a sip of water here.
Sure. Yeah, and you see that fall. I mean, there's a million examples. I mean, the $7 billion Man, that series that ran forever, and I mean, there's
the idea, I guess, that I'm trying to relate here is that when we look at magic, the reason magic fails today, the reason why you have people draw circles and they chant or do something is because they don't understand that there is something more going on with these symbols than just drawing them. That understanding the cognitive thought form, the point from which they are drawn and their association, and then unifying with that. Because effectively what you're trying to do is visualize in anthropomorphic terms things which are supplying you focus. Yeah. And we use technology today to do what perhaps we have the memory of being able to do anciently. And I'm speaking in much more ancient terms. It's almost like we're suffering from a traumatic brain injury. I used to work with folks who had that, and one of them was an accountant, and she had perfect memory of being an accountant, and she knew everything about it, except for she couldn't do accounting anymore.
Yeah.
And because of the injury. And I believe that's what we feel within our souls when we're like, I feel that magic could be real. I feel like it could do something, but there's just no power to the system. If power is generated by electromagnetism, and the stars around us are generating that for us, right? They're projecting that. If stars are electric, which is what I believe they are, and if the universe is electric, then we're awash in consciousness.
Yeah.
And if there's not enough power to the system, then our mind can't break that conscious inertia to make something happen. We supplement that then by making machines that allow us to communicate over distances. We supplement, instead of telepathy, let's say.
Yeah.
We supplement clairaudience and clairvoyance with TVs and computers, when we might have been able to actually see through the eyes of animals and beings around us simply by projecting our minds outward, because we're all connected real time, whether we're dialed up with power or dialed down. And I sort of feel like right now, our place in the galaxy and where we are rotationally, we're dialed down. It's like a light dimmer switch on your wall, right? And so we're still burning, but we're dialed down, and this dialing down has made us savage. It's why every philosophy, every religion, alchemy included, says you need to elevate your energy from within, because there's not enough going on the outside to do it. So now you have to do it. You have to be responsible for raising your energy up. And until that changes environmentally, and I think it may, the cycles are there. If you go through the Vedics, you can see that there's definitely a cycle that we're moving out of and moving into a new age, for sure. I definitely believe that. I mean, there's no question in my mind that a shift of profound significance is taking place right now, that we're finding equality at last, emerging, between all of us as human beings, regardless of gender or beliefs or whatever. And it's to me, it's amazing how far we're coming, and so rapidly,
Yeah.
I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I mean, we're heartened by that too, because at the same time, when you could, as some people say, the world is getting worse and things are bad, and look at this and look at that, and pointing to all these examples. On the other hand, you've got people like you putting out your channel and us on our talks, and I mean, there's a resurgence of the good as well. So I firmly believe that we're definitely at least starting to see a shift in a positive direction, for sure.
Well, and I believe that you can guide your particular resonance with the shift through your perspective. If you want to sit there and look out your window and go, oh crap, the world is just absolutely imploding and everything is horrible, that's going to be magnified in you, and that's what you'll see. That'll be the kind of shift you enjoy, I guess.
Yeah.
For me, I choose to look at something else, because it's just as valid, and to me, the shaking up, the reason so many people are freaking out is because we are obsessed with stasis as human beings. I believe that, again, is part of our trauma, that things have changed so many times, so dramatically, so spontaneously, that all we want is for it to just be static. So we want a God that's not changeable. We want an eternity that's unchangeable. We want everything to just be still, even though the universe around us is constantly changing and vibrating. Yeah. And if you embrace that change, if you seek it out as to participate in it, to get involved in it, which is why I do the channel. There's a need, just like you probably have experienced. There's a need, there's a hunger. The fact that the people are hungering, to me, is evidence of positive change.
Yeah, absolutely.
It means that there's fertile ground and people are reaching up and growing, and they're wanting it, and their judgment is such that they're seeking unconventional means, but they're still using their intelligence. It makes me so happy. It just does, because, as I had mentioned, I had been in a kind of religious environment that was really literal, and I had reached a point where that wasn't tenable. And like everyone else that comes out of religion, I think you hit that anti-religious vibe, and you either go Wiccan or magician or something. I did both. So I get the whole Skyclad thing and the Book of Shadows thing and all the weird Wiccan things and fun Wiccan things, and and I get the communities, the pagan communities. And what I found was that people generally are just replacing one thing for another. They get just as rigid about their beliefs in one thing or another. So I left those, and that's when I got really curious. Now, a component of that was I had become injured, and so I had a lot of time to just think. And for me, my injury involved a high degree of constant pain. So I had to figure out how to resolve that for myself, and use whatever I could. And that's where understanding different techniques that alchemy provides, you can work to heal yourself, and if not completely heal, diminish or become more resistant to, or learn to follow the rhythm of it and honor that, when it's called upon. Like alchemy can allow you to become very in tune with your body. And so I sought it out because I had a definite, motivation. Like I definitely wanted to be healthier, live longer, and I believe that there was a connection. The electric universe thing didn't actually happen for me until about 2000. I'm thinking about 2012. I was on YouTube and I came across a channel called Suspicious Observers. Ben Davidson, big shout out to him. He doesn't know me, but he's amazing, and I've been following him. He basically has been demonstrating the electromagnetic nature of planet Earth. And he's been, and it was through him that I then found Thunderbolts.org, which is a community of scientists. These are plasma physicists that are interdisciplinary. So you have electric universe geologists. You have, and this is, of course, these are my peeps.
Sure,
These are the guys I look to, because now I'm being supplied with science that gives me language that then I'm able to translate into other terms that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
So I never abandoned all these other roots. I kept my knowledge because I'd become like a scriptorian, and my specialty is Bronze Age cultures in the Old Testament, and on a religious side of things, and Stone Age cultures. And so I was able to then use what I learned from these plasma physicists and also biologists and chemists, and see that what they were describing in one term had already been described mythologically or visually on murals or in sculpture. And all you need are the tools to decipher it. And that's when things started opening up for me. So my interests have been really broad. And a component of that is just because I've found that everything can be interesting. When you see the connection to it, and you realize that the importance, for instance, of understanding the chemistry at its heart is a description of electrical exchanges between energetic bodies.
Absolutely. Positives and negatives and
exactly.
Yeah.
It's the revolution of valence within the electron shells of atoms which are encountering each other. When you recognize that, it immediately drops you right back into mentalism, because electromagnetism is mentalism, and mentalism pulls you back into the magic of it. Everything that we use to describe in magical terms can be described electromagnetically. Are you familiar with World of Warcraft?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right, sweet. So you know what Fel Magic is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Fel Magic is a description of an electromagnetic dynamic where an energetic body encounters a change of state, and the result of that change of state creates something new. So Gul'dan has baby Thrall in his arms, stillborn. He looks over and he says, I'm a warlock, and there's a doe. I'm going to suck the life out of it, which he does, and then he takes that energy, some of which is lost in the exchange, and then pumps it into Gul'dan, and then Gul'dan turns green as a result of Fel contamination. But this exchange can actually be described in terms of plasma physics and the electric universe. And so it's another description of electromagnetism. The reason it's called Fel Magic is because something encounters a fallen state. So we as human beings, when you realize that everything around us is electromagnetic, which means it's light, and we are beings of light, then if we go out and we harvest an organism, causing a change of state in that being, and then we consume that to extend our life, we're conducting Fel Magic on a material level. See the exchange, the connection?
Yeah.
It's pretty deep, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm sitting here with my mind blown just a little bit.
Yeah, so when I play World of Warcraft, which I absolutely love, I contemplate this as a result of what I'm doing. So if you're looking at arcane magic then deals with the flow. And when you talk about the flow, then what flows? The force. So instead of manipulating it and drawing from it, you change so that you can work with it. So that if it's a higher vibration, then you have to up your vibration, which results in sacrifice, and then you become a Jedi, right?
Yeah.
So you shed all sorts of things in order to identify with a polarized ideal, whether that be light or darkness. And I'm so excited for the new Star Wars movie because I anticipate they're going to introduce a gray Jedi, which is the middle pillar in the Kabbalah, where you recognize that the right or left-hand path is not necessarily utilizing the full spectrum even within that path, nor is it necessarily right or wrong.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah,
one without the other cannot exist.
Exactly.
You need the dark pillar to contain and define something. You need the light pillar to break those boundaries and go someplace else. And somewhere in the middle, the role of the magician and the role of the alchemist is always the middle pillar. Definitely the role of the alchemist is right in the middle. Magicians can choose to honor one side or another, and often they do. And you'll hear people say they're a white magician or a dark magician. And those of us who are alchemists chuckle a little bit because we understand where the concept of right or left-hand path is generated. It actually comes from a physiological dynamic involved when you walk with a stick. And this is something that I learned as a result of my injury, because I had to learn to re-walk from walking all over again and not walking before. And the way it works is if your right leg or right foot is injured, okay, then you have to keep your stick on the left side. You keep it on the left side. And if your left foot is injured, then you keep it on the right. In the movies, they always do it wrong. They have the stick on the same injured side, but any good physical therapist will tell you it'll just injure your body by doing that. You keep it on the opposite side. When you understand Kabbalistically, then your hand then the color your hand represents defines the path upon which your foot steps. Get it?
Yeah.
So the right hand path is led by the left foot extended, and the left hand path is led by the right foot extended. So the idea that the left-hand path is dark is because the right foot is on the pillar of severity, which is black.
Yeah.
And it's assumed that it's evil. And similarly, and of course, the left-hand path is sinister. Now, the left hand is sitting on the left side of the body, though. So you're all like, well, how is this possible, right? How has the left hand become dark? The definition of what we are esoterically is always what we are at rest. We begin at rest and then we're set into motion, right? That happens with birth and everything else. So at rest, those of you out there, your esoteric listeners, there's a posture called Osiris at rest. And it's basically with your arms crossed over your chest so that your left hand is on the right shoulder and your right hand is on the left shoulder. In that posture, you now can see where the left hand is black and the right hand is white. Get it? And then when you become active, your hands extend to the sides, and now your hands define your footfalls. Yeah. So if you're walking with your magic staff or your cane or what happens, then your right hand defines the path of the left foot, and the left hand defines the path of the right foot. And interestingly enough, you often see certain fantasy characters, like in Full Metal Alchemist, where the young man, the cost of his alchemy, his human alchemy, it costs him an arm and a leg. And in fact, it's his right arm and his left leg. So it's an identifier of a principle that was lost, right? So, or is it his left arm and his right leg? I forget. It's been a while since I've watched.
Well, and that's
he loses an arm and a leg. You get it.
Yeah, and this
it's the right arm.
This idea is something that we've talked about on the show quite a bit, and I've been fascinated with for a while. Is that, you know, we often want to put some sort of dualistic, moralistic judgment on things, when in reality, you're talking about two sides of the same coin. You're talking about one thing that just may have two dualistic sides to it, but it's all one. And bad, you know, the judgment of good versus evil or good and bad doesn't really apply to, you know, the left hand or the right hand. It's
largely perspective, in my opinion. It's one pillar looking at the other going, dude, you're so chaotic, and the other one's like, dude, you're so stagnant, what's wrong?
But they're part of the same tree.
They're part of the same tree, yeah. You know, and literally it would be like the top of the tree looking at the root system going, dude, why don't you ever just break out of the ground and do something?
Yeah.
Roots are like, why don't you start sucking up some water, brother?
Right. Right. And both are so super important.
Right? You can't have one without the other. So one exists in the light and the other part exists in the darkness, and both parts make your tree grow. Without it, there's no tree outside.
One of the things that has definitely been part of my own personal awakening has been the understanding of the 7 Hermetic Principles. And I see, I definitely don't know as much about alchemy as you do. Of course, I'm very, very new still, but I see a correlation to kind of the principles of alchemy, where you've got the, you got the dissolve, and then you got the coagulation. I feel like there's a common theme between those sets of principles, and it's definitely been something that's helped me understand the world around me a lot better. So one of the things that I think you would agree with me on, and we chatted about this a little bit yesterday, but you know, there's definitely, you think of magic and you think of kind of the woo-woo spell incantation thing, let's light a candle, and you know, that I'm not discounting any of that at all, but in my mind, and the thing that I'm most curious about is it's helped me understand the way the world really functions on a very real, scientific, actual level. So it's not something that's kind of, you know, woo and put on a robe and do a dance. It's helped me understand the way that the world really actually is, even down to the, you know, molecular level.
Yes, and for me, this is where, for myself, that's the point at which the mysticism happens, because you can have a theory of everything where all things can be described using those 7 Hermetic Principles, which are absolutely key in engaging in that solvent coagula, you know, the alchemical transmutation that if you do it right, there's no forcing it. Like, that's the difference, is you allow yourself to experience the wonder. I suppose that's why, biblically you hear the kingdom of heaven is populated with children. And the reason for this is because they're teachable and they're really eager to learn.
Yeah.
And they're really eager to go, you know what, that idea was great, but then I'm going to move to this new idea. And they have this capacity to simply transition, and recognize that certain ideas are just foundation to get you to the next stone in the river, to cross it. And as adults, we forget that. We forget that, and we embrace dogma, and we embrace prevailing orthodoxy, and we embrace authority. And so if someone who appears to have authority lays it out for you, we stop in our skepticism, we stop in our questioning, and I think that's where the loss is. If you can keep that, just, I joke, my wife and I joke, because we love the smartphones. I'm showing my age here. Because look, I grew up dreaming about tech like this, where I could just hold a small device up to my mouth and go, tell me something from the sum of human knowledge, which is essentially, when you pull up Google and you say, okay, how tall is so-and-so? How old is this? Show me this picture. Every time I have a question, I do that. Every time. It just supplements my understanding. And our lack of diving at that opportunity, because all of us have it throughout the day. I guarantee you, there are at least 100 times a day where you're uncertain about a thing, and rather than seek some kind of foundational certainty that you could build on that idea later, we satisfy ourselves with what might feel right, as opposed to just finding out what it is.
Yeah.
And moving forward. And not doing that is just, it's such a loss, because it's not necessary anymore today. And we don't have to, I guess that's where the alchemy, it's a thinking thing that leads you to feeling, and as opposed to religion, which is a feeling thing that might lead you to think, and it's a tool that that is great for describing your experience as a person, to yourself or to other people, on every possible level, and from like just getting married to work with people. It's astonishing to me how much we can learn about ourselves if we simply allow ourselves to be introduced to the people around us by not making assumptions and letting them show us their countenance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that brings us kind of to, one of the next things I wanted to get into a little bit with you is you are, you're the modern alchemist. So a lot of people, and I know there's several of them listening, think, alchemy is interesting and it's fascinating, and it's a book I wouldn't mind reading, but that's from way back when. I mean, what does alchemy have to do with today's world? When I hop in my car and I go to work, and we watch a movie at night and go to bed. What would you say to that person that thinks that this is a dead science that we don't need anymore?
That's a great question. I one of my best friends this summer, his wife and I, we all got together, and she posed a similar question. Hers was, "What's the point?"
Yeah.
and it's so true. What is the point? I'm not going to proselyte. I'm not going to try to sell anyone on alchemy. I've never been good at that kind of stuff. For me, the point has been to sate my curiosity. And I needed a system of thinking that allowed me to contextualize what I was experiencing as a person, because it goes beyond the science goes beyond just chemistry. Okay. When you realize that psychology draws heavily upon understanding of alchemical archetypes, that the idea, for instance, here's a great example, the idea of the id, the ego, and the superego is simply a re-expression of salt, mercury, and sulfur. That is, those of us who understand the art, and then they understand psychology drawing from it, it's like almost plagiarism to say that it's their unique idea, but that's what Freud did. And then Carl Jung took that and went even farther. And modern psychology breaks down, you'll see these personality profile systems.
Yeah.
Those are essentially elemental correspondences. That an alchemist would go, oh yeah, this is the corresponding outcome of the combination of air and earth, or fire and water, and because you've seen the one that's a cube with the 4, and then there's another one that breaks it down into 8, and each of these are essentially drawing, if not from an elemental correspondence, they might be pulling from an astrological correspondence, and not calling it that, but using those characteristics per se as a example of something that they've then given a new name to, like id, ego, and superego. Yeah.
Well, and
so to say that it's not in use today is simply to not understand that the alchemists have all hidden themselves in secular clothes, and they're still hard at work getting their stuff done. And the reason I know this is because by understanding what they do, I can identify it in their work. I can see someone's work like Thor Ragnarok, and I can go, clearly someone has an understanding of this mythology on levels which are profound, because right down to the coloring of the costuming, or the fact, in the trailer you've seen Thor gets a haircut, right?
I actually haven't even seen the trailers for it yet.
Yeah, I hope I didn't spoil it for you, but
no.
Anyway, there's other characters mythologically that get haircuts that go through a crisis, and that is a direct correlation to that. Samson is one of them biblically.
Yeah.
So when you see that scene, and he's screaming, "No, not my hair," you can laugh and go, "I know what that's about." So yeah, you can laugh and go, "I know what that's about."
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's there came a point in time in our history where, unfortunately, calling yourselves an alchemist or a magician or whatever was frowned upon, and all of a sudden you'd be not even frowned upon, but you'd be put to death and in jeopardy of your life. So you had to call yourself something different. So I guess psychologist is probably a little safer than magician.
The Inquisition definitely played its part in that, and I would say that there was a definite shift that took place and is continuing to take place. There definitely is a struggle. Dan Brown in his books, he clearly fixates on this struggle between esoteric communities, in his Da Vinci Code and subsequent books that he's done. And religious communities, and that they're mutually exclusive to a high degree. Anciently and not so anciently in our history, I mean, look, when I was growing up as a kid, I remember a young lady being, and this was like when I was in junior high, the community was heavily Christian, and because she was different, they ostracized her, called her a witch, and all these horrible things. And I grew up with televangelists on TV like Robert Tilton, just hours and hours of Saturdays and Sundays, and because we only had 3 channels, right?
Sure.
So just pounding away at religious stuff, and so it's only been recent, like the 20th century is really this breakout point. And it's funny to look and read the works of 20th century esotericists. Dion Fortune, by the way, if you need to read somebody, read her. She was a member of the Golden Dawn, and her books, she explicitly talks about the fact that she's going to take you as far as she can without violating any of her covenants. And I understand that kind of thinking, where there's a great amount of information that can be disseminated. And these communities, these esoteric communities, are so overburdened with anxiety over secrecy because they're not truly teaching their people what is important and what is not important. So all of it's just under the blanket of secrecy, that no one really understands anything, you know. And so as a component of that, she, as a 20th century author, came out and wrote several books. The Mystic Cabal is one of my favorites. And of course, there are other esotericists out there, Crawley and Arthur Edward Waite. Everything that we do today, Gerald Gardner, God, we owe so much to Gerald Gardner, and the fact that his libido created, you know, Wicca.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, but seriously, the whole idea of being sky-clad and everything, Gerald Gardner, and he was a hound dog. He was a player. So, but each of those people, they allowed for people like me and you to exist today. If not for them, you know, because I know that there are many of your listeners out there that even today won't wear a pentacle exposed.
Oh yeah.
For fear that a Christian somewhere will misunderstand. See, now when I see a pentacle, what I see is a testament to the importance of the planet Venus electromagnetically, that she provides for us a buffer. And each point on the pentacle is actually a point of conjunction between the Earth and Venus as they transit around the sun. And so as they work together, it eventually creates a pentacle. So that's really what that's about. And that's why it's associated with the sacred feminine and with her when it's point downward like a cup, right? Or point upward, I'm sorry, like a spear. It's ironic, really. I've talked about this in other classes, but sadly, you know, that pentacle form is all over our country. So don't be afraid to wear it, guys. Like, sheriffs have it on their badges. The U.S. Army and Air Force proudly bear it on their uniforms. There's 50 of them all over the flag. The Congressional Medal of Honor is an inverted pentacle. So, and that's because the function there is about war. So,
yeah,
but it helps to know what this stuff is built about. You know, I mean, sadly, you get all this misunderstanding, and it again goes back to literalism, because someone out there believes that there literally is some dude who's super evil,
yeah.
and is creating all this chaos, and that you can engage with him on a physical level. I just it's so sad.
It is. And you know, for every interaction that you have with one of those people, and unfortunately I've got lots of them in my life, you know, living down here in the Bible Belt of Texas, you know, we run into that a fair amount. But for every one of those interactions that just kind of makes you have that big sigh, you're encouraged, because, you know, you run into these people that are open to listening and understanding and learning some more, and maybe taking the fear away from some of these symbols that have been co-opted, and trying to figure out, well, what does that really mean after all? So there's definitely some hope there, even though it can be frustrating.
Sure. Like I said, this shift is happening, and it's exciting. You know, the way to view this, the way to get really pumped up for this transition. 2,000 years ago, collectively, we agreed that something had changed, and the Common Era began. And with that began a whole movement, exoterically, religiously, and underneath that was a bedrock of esoteric development. And it's because something changed, and it had been changed long enough that everyone had agreed nothing was going to change again for who knows how long. And that system was established. 2,000 years later, that's us, we're at a point where if you follow precession of equinox, there are ages and periods, and we're right at the cusp of a new period developing.
Yeah.
And just like fashion trends, which sort of bleed from one decade into another, so it's not truly a 80s style, but it's sort of a combination of 70s and 80s at one point, and then 80s and 90s at another. Precession works the same way. So as we're moving into a new period, we should expect new exoteric religions to develop and new esoteric understanding to act as foundation for that. And Christianity today is nothing like it was 2,000 years ago. So, it's been a continuous process of evolution from the Protestant Reformation all the way to now. And I'm excited. That in and of itself is exciting, because you're watching people, as you say, look at and re-examine these symbols and say, wow, maybe this is something else. Maybe this works for something else. Maybe this is something other than what I was told it was. And that curiosity is what stimulates this enlightenment, right? This curiosity stimulates enlightenment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I see people questioning all sorts of things more than they have in the past, or maybe I'm just opening my eyes to it a little bit more, but either way, it's very encouraging to see happen. So I'm curious, I don't know if we circled back around to finishing your origin story. I definitely don't want to lose track of that.
Well, we left off eventually, while I was still a member within the church in the last couple of years of that, I had started developing an interest in the esoteric. The Mormon religion itself, its history, has esoteric origins. I don't want to get tied up in anything negative, because there's nothing negative there. When you understand that 19th century America was all about magic and all about the occult, and that it was a very exciting time for a lot of people, because you had your snake oil salesmen, and you had prophets, and you had these revivals, and it was this whole resurgence where in America they were developing who we were going to be.
Yeah.
Nation later. And we forget about that. But all those people, there was a lot that led. There had to be a fertile bed that led to 20th century esoteric tradition popping out. And that was this 19th century fervor for it, right? And Joseph Smith was part of that. Well, I understood that. So I started looking at that, and I started looking at what he was looking at. I started studying some of the things that he was studying, like an Egyptian Book of the Dead, and I began to realize that there was a whole lot more going on. And this, combined with my understanding of Bronze and Stone Age cultures, led me to a new paradigm, which was that what we endure today is what I call the Piscean lens, meaning that we've been in the age of Pisces. And our assumption is that everything has always looked this way, everything has always been this way. When we look up at the sky, that's what our ancestors saw 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And when I realized that this was this huge amount of distortion, that every interpretation of a myth took on a completely different complexion, when I understood that the sky looked different.
Yeah.
That the reason the sky looks this way now is significant and is literally the core material for almost every modern religion, and that it is described as the crucifixion.
Yeah.
And recognizing that that's what they were talking about, and not some literal thing going on here on the surface of planet Earth that had some profound, eternal, infinite implication. That suddenly put everything in a new light. and led me to seeking out, as I mentioned, Electric Universe guys. At the same time, as I was delving into Egyptology and working my way through the divinities there, I had broken through with Electric Universe science, and I'd been exposed to that. And because of my chemistry background, it was like, oh, well, this completely makes sense. I don't know why no one teaches this in school, because this is everything you need to build a universe, And then it occurred to me, oh, well, that's why they don't teach this in school, because it's everything you need to build a universe. So you have enough people out there exposed to this knowledge, and you have 100,000 Nikola Teslas rolling around instead of just one.
Yes.
Because Nikola Tesla was an esotericist that used the 7 Hermetic Principles as a guide and keystone to understanding how the universe operates. So when I had learned that as well, I was like, oh my gosh, now everything makes sense. Now I understand that there's nothing to be afraid of here. I guess that was probably the one thing. My advice to everyone out there who's trying to break away from a standard religion, find something new, do what Charlton Heston did in Planet of the Apes. There's this thing at the end of the movie where, he's talking to Zira and Cornelius, and they're all like, you don't want to go that way because it's forbidden, it's dangerous, don't go there. And what's his first reaction? I'm going there. That was like the first place he went. And I started adopting that. Like every time I'd encounter someone online or something maligning or saying something negative regarding an esoteric idea or principle or a teacher or science, that was immediately the thing I would start studying, because I wanted to find out why this person was so interested in saying it was horrible. And then when I realized that 9 out of 10 times the person thinking that something was bad didn't actually have a clue about what they were talking about.
Right.
I was like, oh, this needs to be fixed. Because other people might want to know. And then that was 3 years ago. And that's when I started the Modern Alchemist Channel. It was in 2014 I realized that deficit existed, and then in 2015 I started the channel, because I was like, okay, I'm going to just try to work with this. And as I've done that, as any good teacher knows, you learn more from your students as a result of their questions than you would have ever learned by yourself. And so, I'm deeply indebted to my viewers, because their questions have resulted in me having these huge leaps forward. Because a lot of times, someone who's not exposed to the esoteric, they'll walk up to it like the guy just walking up to a puzzle and go, oh, well, this piece should go right there, right? Isn't that where that piece goes? I don't know, it looks like it should go there. And with no knowledge, and I'm like, oh, damn right it goes there.
That's exactly where it goes.
Eureka.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's that whole adage that the best way to learn something is to start teaching it. So, I mean, completely makes sense.
Yeah, it's been wonderful for me, and so I'll keep doing this, indefinitely. I enjoy it a lot.
Well, and just on a personal note, the whole alchemy thing, I started down this road in I don't know, kind of a roundabout sort of a way, and felt drawn to Hermeticism for a while, and I've always been very interested in chemistry and very interested in astrology, and while I don't fully understand it, fully is even the wrong word, while I don't even partially understand it, I mean, numerology's always fascinated me. So when I kind of saw what alchemy was, or heard about alchemy, I immediately felt drawn to it, because it felt more logical than some of the other things, and it was a little kind of more in my comfort zone, I suppose. So just on a more personal note, it's been interesting hearing kind of your origin story being something kind of similar. You had a chemistry background, and it's definitely been a draw for me.
Yeah, I the thing I like is that all of the things that we do as a component of some kind of spiritual pursuit You can do in the pursuit of alchemy, but without necessarily having all the trappings
Yeah.
involved. Um, for instance, I get asked about meditation frequently. And when do I meditate? Do I have a devotional? Do I sit down in front of an altar and meditate in front of a mandala or something? And I'm like, no, not at all. In fact, my meditations exist periodically throughout the day because I understand that the concept of meditation is not to clear my mind, but to focus my mind on a particular thing, a particular idea, and deconstruct it. 20th century esoteric tradition treats meditation as an active um, application of intellect with an objective usually, and so I might sit there, and my objective, let's say, as I'm looking out my window and examining a tree, I might meditate upon its structure and remind myself of its coaxial nature, that there is a phloem and a xylem, and remind myself of the means by which a tree develops, and then I'll start visualizing that structure. So for me, that's what the meditation is. But to do a meditation like that, you have to fill your cup. You have to go out and learn a thing so that you can think about it. And that's why so many of us in the West fail at our meditation, because we think the whole point is to relax and chill out, and then they all fall asleep. And it's like, no, you're active. When you see a person like a monk sitting in front of the image of Buddha, say, my instinct is that that monk is working their way through any number of things that they have learned from understanding the Buddha, and extracting that knowledge on multiple levels as they're working their way towards a nirvanic experience. That experience comes when you feel that connection, and you can do that in a 3-minute meditation while you're sitting there in a grocery store line, and you happen to be admiring, let's say, a plant that's sitting in the flower section on the other side of the register. This happened for me the other day. And just recognizing, like, the fact that, you know, a certain color might mean a certain thing. Yeah. And so you work your mind backwards through the meaning of a color and why that color might mean that and all its associations. Those are meditations. And then you can think about the Kundalini, and then think about the complementary opposite of the color. And that's just by looking at a single flower while I'm waiting at a register to buy my groceries. Yeah. You know, and I'm calm, and I'm like in a bubble when that happens. Like, it's wonderful, because you're completely present in a moment of pure thought. Yeah. And the breathing and all those techniques that you learn in the early stages, those should just be part of who you are by the time you get there. If it's not, then it's not meditation you should worry about. It's your life. Like, clearly you have some shit you got to sort. Yeah. Because you can't think. And that's what I always tell my students. Like, if every time they sit down, they're like, then everything comes to the thing. I think about my daycare and all this other stuff. I'm like, then you need to be doing it, because clearly that's where your head is at. And until you finish that, you can't do the other thing. It's meditation, to me, is not a place you go to run away. It's a place you go to get something done.
To do the work, yeah.
Yeah, do the work, because you're actively contemplating, ruminating, thinking about, associating. And then it becomes super productive, and that's when you have your Martin Luther's Tünger-Leibniz experience, his tower experience, where he came up with, you know, his edicts, where he was like, oh, there's a problem, and I need to tell the Catholic Church about it. So, yeah, that's when you have that.
So for people that have been interested in this conversation and think to themselves, I really want to dig in a little bit deeper. Obviously, you've got your YouTube channel, which is The Modern Alchemist. what else might they look at? Is there a good starting point that they might start with? I mean, do you suggest that you start with the tarot or astrology first? I mean, where do you think you start the journey?
I'm glad you asked this, because this is another really, really, really good question. Over the last 5 years, as I've been teaching publicly and taking in actual students and stuff, I've gone through a number of different methods to approach this, because there's really no book out there that says how to teach the esoteric for dummies. You know?
Right. Well, not yet. I mean, you've got to write one, right?
Yeah, maybe there will be, but I haven't found an instruction manual. So what I discovered, though, was if you adopt the classical method of teaching, the Greek method, where you teach to the interests of the student. So if you're interested in the tarot, if that gets you going, then do it. Like, learn it. But don't. Here's the problem with the tarot. This happens to everyone. You buy a tarot deck, say it's a Rider-Waite deck, and you pull that little book out, and the first thing you read it, and you're all excited, and then the magician, and it's got 50 different words that don't make any sense when read together, and describing that card, and then you turn it, and it's like, and then another 50 words describing the next card and the next card, and the result is that book isn't teaching you that those singular words are defining that card within a particular context. Yeah. So throw that book out and start learning the tarot from the ground up, if that's the thing that turns you on. If you like astrology, learn that. One of my dear friends, Tony, when I was working with him, he just linked into astrology. It sung to him, the mathematics, the nature of it, the personality of it. It worked for him. So you learn it. My daughter went into palmistry, because that's what appealed to her. She liked the personal nature of it. She liked the fact that the idea that electromagnetically, through her discovery has been that you can see the nature of someone's electromagnetic signature expressed in their hands, believe it or not. But understanding the archetypes and the fact that the hand is structured in esoteric terms to describe an astrological relationship, because each of the fingers the digits are broken down into each of the astrological houses. The fingers represent certain planets. The mounds represent certain planets. So then learning palmistry will get you back to astrology. Learning the tarot will get you back to astrology or to the Kabbalah. If you decide you like the structure of Kabbalah, then pursue that. That will get you to numerology, because there are numerological correspondences which are expressed within the tree.
Yeah. And
those expressions also relate to planetary influences, which is why when I teach Kabbalah, rather than always sticking to the classic Hebrew name of each of the spheres, I refer to them by their planetary influence. So Binah I describe as Saturn, or Chesed as Jupiter, or Geburah as Mars. And the reason for that is because then it's sort of like looking at a Star Trek bridge crew. And each of the bridge members now are popping up in their uniforms, fulfilling a given function. You know, Mercury is your communications officer, right? Mars is Worf, your tactical officer. Riker is Jupiter.
Wow. I have loved the Next Generation.
Saturn, by the way.
I have loved the Next Generation forever, and I didn't even put that together until you just said that.
Oh yeah, it's built. By the way, Gene Roddenberry. If you want to learn alchemy, watch Star Trek. Oh my God, it is so awesome. The uniforms break down into the expression of alchemical colors, and the jobs assigned to those uniforms are perfect expressions of that. Awesome. And then later on, in Next Generation, you get hybridized secondary colors, like Deanna Troi will wear purple, which is a combination of a blue and a red, which is salt and sulfur. So here's a person who exists to stabilize emotional states in purple, right? Yeah. And of course, purple then is tied to Venus, and she does fulfill the Venusian role. And when Barclay does his holodeck thing, she identifies herself as the goddess of love and empathy.
Yes, she
So
does. Oh my gosh.
literally, Roddenberry builds inside of Star Trek everything you need to know about alchemy. And in the original Star Trek, and he keeps it contemporary. So, for instance, in the original Star Trek, the command colors are mercury, which is gold. In the Next Generation, command colors switch to red, which is sulfur. The transition is an expression of what we wanted in our leaders. In the 60s, what we wanted was a guy who, on the surface, was an intellectual, right?
Right.
But underneath, he was emotional and driven. And now you got Captain Kirk. That's literally what he is. And what's awesome about Kirk is because he is not an intellectual person, his uniform keeps getting torn off of his body.
It does.
Because it's a bad fit. And when you realize that Kirk started in security and that security in the original Star Trek is sulfur, that's the best destiny for Kirk as a security officer, because then he would never lose his uniform. Instead, he gets put into the role of an intellectual, and he has nothing but challenges. So, and I love Kirk, by the way. I grew up in it. So Picard, on the other hand, represents the new man, which you'd like to be all touchy-feely on the outside, but at his core be an intellectual with the towering giant, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you get Picard with his classical education and his Shakespearean quotes, and so he embodies a different kind of leader, but both are described alchemically. One is mercury and one is sulfur, and you can describe the whole series in these terms, and learn a lot about alchemy by asking yourself, like, why is it the security guys always flame out in the original series? Why do they always die?
Yeah.
Well, because the sulfurous entity is infernal, and an esoteric tradition is, this demon pops in and out of existence, and it usually is, incendiary. So the security officer, you live by the sword, die by the sword. Anyway, and there are other aspects that sulfur ties to the creation of machinery. And so you get someone like Hephaestus, which is Scotty, right, the engineer of the gods. You get similarly sulfur's tied to spirit. So you get communications officers like Uhura, who is sitting there always going, oh, and then there's this thing happening, like a mystic in some way, informing Kirk, who is the magician in the center, all the things that's going on. You can almost see Kirk or Picard as magician within a circle, and in fact, the illusion of a circle is always presented on the bridge.
Yes.
In the original, to give you a sense that he's performing some kind of ordinance, and then of course the positionality of the helm, and you could go on and on, dude. Star Trek is epic for teaching stuff like this.
Man, that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to rewatch it again now. I didn't do it very long ago, but I'm gonna rewatch it.
It's funny. I literally just I'll go through these cycles. I guess I'm pumped on Star Trek because I just got through watching DS9. I finished the whole thing, and I actually like Deep Space Nine. I was really surprised. I had not really considered it, but they do this beautiful thing where they introduce into a secular society all this esoteric stuff. So Benjamin Sisko is a magician in his own right, in concert with entities that exist outside of our conception of space-time, right? Or time, the flow of time. And understanding this blending, this balancing act, because traditionally Star Trek is dismissive of religion.
Yeah.
And in that one, you find that this religion, there's some beautiful things. Oh, they have this great episode. I wish I could remember the one, but it deals with these three Cardassian scientists who want to help expand the nature of the wormhole. And there's this whole series of prophecies associated with serpents and stuff like that. And at the conclusion of the episode, because everyone's worried about it being these women and these Cardassian scientists being evil and stuff, nope. He proves exactly my point, that all the prophecies are dealing with stuff celestial. And so at the end of the episode, you see that the serpents are actually these cometary bodies which have broken up, and the whole thing is describing an astrological or astronomical phenomenon that is witnessed by the people. And so the idea of calling those entities, by the way, in DS9 prophets, it's equivalent to in the Old Testament calling them judges.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's exactly the same.
Wow.
So, and the description, it really, there's a lot of beauty to that show that is quite extraordinary on an esoteric level as you go through and you watch it. They definitely like to play with that.
Oh yeah, that's super fascinating. Well, man, Aubrey, I really appreciate your time. I know we're kind of getting to that point where we need to wrap things up. Is there anything you want to leave everybody before we do that?
Basically, to quote from one of my favorite people in a movie, there's no need to be mean. You don't have to be mean, because no matter where you go, there you are.
I like that.
And yeah, it's Buckaroo Banzai. and it's really awesome, because I like to live by that. Because when you recognize, that is effectively a colloquial way of saying namaste.
Yeah.
It means I see the divinity within you. And so if you remember to just, in those real hard moments, remove yourself from the equation just a little bit, when you're driving or whatever, you can transmute an entire situation, starting from the inside out, and alter reality by identifying yourself, your ego, and dealing with that, and not letting it drive you into an action that you would find the consequence being unfavorable. We all do it. We're all there. We're definitely in our bodies, and that makes us emotional beings. But we're also spiritual beings in our body, and we possess within us intellect. That's the beauty of alchemy there, is that it gives you that union where the body is one component of consciousness, the universal spirit emanating through us, empowering us, keeping us going, that's another. And then we stand in the middle right there. And for a time, we're a soul. We're a combination of both of those, incarnate. And that's not just us, that's all of us. So we should take care of each other. We should figure out ways to not be so concerned with everything that's horrible, and try to promote all the things that are wonderful, so that the wonderful gets lots of energy that people are expending on the other, and the wonderful becomes amazingly wonderful. Because the world, there's not, from where I stand, from reading all the ancient mythologies and all the prophecies, there's not going to be some magical thing happen to save us from ourselves. We have to save ourselves, and we have all the power we need to get in there and do it. We just need to do it, and it starts really small. Don't think big. To borrow a phrase from the French scientist in the Corps, when he's talking to Aaron Eckhart, and he's like, how do you do it? And he's like, well, I don't worry about saving the world. I worry about saving 3 people, my family, and then the associated people around them. And then I work from that and keep that in place. And if we can just do that, imagine how awesome everything would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. That.
I think those are...
We'd all become heroes, and everything would be spectacular. And then, people will change, because I have faith. Dude, I have so much faith in people. I have so much faith that we can do all of it. I really do. I've seen it. I've seen it in the deepest meditations.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you. And I think those are very wise words. And we just all need to be good to each other in our day-to-day interactions. And it's that momentary day-to-day interaction when you're get caught off in traffic, or you're holding the door open for somebody. That's where the magic can manifest itself right there. And that's where the divine can be present, is in those interactions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Aubrey, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
your
much.
time.
Well, thank you.
This has been a great chat. I'm going to be watching pretty much every video you've got because I want to know everything that you know. Very, very fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. And anytime you want to come back, man, you got an open invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. I absolutely would be happy to do this again with you. It's been really delightful, and I enjoy. It makes me so happy that there are people like you out there that are doing this kind of stuff. It takes a lot of courage, man. It takes a lot of courage to just get out there and do this and support stuff and promote it. And I love it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and to you too. I mean, you're absolutely right. It does take some guts, and thank you to you as well, because you've got your face out there on the internet, and that takes a lot of courage. See, with me, it's just my voice, so I'm not quite as brave as you yet. One day we'll get there. Well, thanks, Aubrey. I appreciate you so much.
Yep. Enjoy Thor Ragnarok.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna watch that this evening.
Sweet. Enjoy it. I'll talk to you soon.
You got it. Thanks.
We are honoured to consider each of you part of our tribe.